Can spirituality and sexuality be experienced as one? And how can the goddess resurface, come back alive, rebirth us today to heal all of these painful wounds of the patriarchy so that we can be liberated to fully express her glory? Today, we'll be interviewing with Dr. Joanna Kujawa, who is the author of The Other Goddess, Mary Magdalene and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge. Join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show, Soul Nectar Show.
Welcome, everyone, for another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of that which is greater than us, the mystery beyond the veil, to those synchronistic moments that lead us inexorably into a deeper understanding of ourselves and the mystery that we are a part of. And I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird. I love having these conversations week after week. And today we are going to be talking about the goddess and the mystery and Eros and the awakening of your connectivity with all that is. And this is an interesting topic to talk about. And today, to help us with that, we have Dr. Joanna Kujawa, who's here to talk about her book. And the book is called, actually, you can see it, is called The Other Goddess, Mary Magdalene and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge. And so, secret knowledge, Eros, and we're all around this all over the world. I feel like now many podcasts and people who are in spirituality are touching on pieces and parts and awakening sparks. And we're all wondering, where's the pathway in to understand ourselves? And we're coming through this dense, prickly forest of patriarchy and coming out of this history that's been thousands of years of suppression of this exact knowledge of ourselves, suppression of this exact understanding of ourselves as spiritual beings. And so we have a lot of suppression in our bodies, right? In our sexuality, in our understanding of ourselves, especially as females. Our understanding of ourselves has been warped, right, through these stories, partial stories and untruths and conditioning through religious structures and things like that. And even in the culture, all the cultures around the world really hampering in a really amazing synchronistic way, hampering the feminine expression, hampering the known of art, right? I mean, it's like across all traditions. That's what I was reading in Dr. Joanna's book. It's like, wow, this is crazy how it's all over these traditions. And so how do we wake it back up? And so that's what we're here to have Dr. Joanna Kujawa here with us. And so I'm so grateful that you're here with us, and say hello and maybe say a little bit about yourself so people can know, because I know that you're a spiritual detective. You've got a BA and an MA in medieval studies. You've been studying this for a very long time. Over 20 years, you've been an academic. So you're a researcher. You've done the research, and this is the book. So tell us a little bit more though about you, so my audience can understand your story. How you got started with this? Why did you even pursue this topic?
Thank you, Carrie, and what a pleasure to be here. So that's a very interesting question because, how we tell our story, right? So that's very important. That's why I wrote this book, The Other Goddess, because I thought I want to say it in a one particular way, because we can choose from different ways of telling our story, how we structure a narrative. What are we focusing on? Yes, so normally people see me as an academic because I have a PhD and this is my job, this is my day job, right? But it took me a while to realize, actually in my mid-30s or so, that this is not who I really am. And this really comes with spiritual awakening. And for me, it really happened then. Although I was brought up as a Catholic, this faith, and I was trying to be a good Catholic, didn't give me any answers. So I started to move away from this. And I started to study other traditions. And although I didn't actually mean to turn into goddess traditions, it was a very spontaneous, as you would call, shamanic path, right? Because I didn't say, oh, like an academic, I want to study different goddess traditions. This didn't happen like that. It happened through spiritual experience, through spiritual practice, and basically spiritual exploration. That's why I like to coin myself a spiritual detective, right? Because I am investigating certain things, but not only in an academic way. I'm investigating my own and other people's spiritual experiences. And then I noticed, and maybe we can go back to my experience, which was very erotic, my spiritual experience. But I noticed that the feminine very often is left out pretty much in all traditions. When we talk about Western Abrahamic traditions, three major Western religions, there's basically no feminine, except in Catholicism, which is this virginal feminine, Virgin Mary. So when I was a little girl and I was growing up in Poland, I saw these images of this beautiful divine feminine, but she was completely asexual. This was unachievable feminine, which I think is actually a patriarchal construct. So there was a feminine, but it was a patriarchal construct because she is really like the Holy Mother, right? That nobody can actually achieve. No woman can achieve in real life. And then I noticed that, in the church, when I was going to a church, that there was this image of this other woman, Mary Magdalene, who is well known in Western Christian tradition, who was somehow close, to the main figure of Christianity, Jesus, but also, and there was some kind of erotic connotation there, but also she was the rejected one, so to speak. And at the same time, so important that they couldn't get rid of her. So I thought that's very interesting. This woman, supposedly a prostitute, and we know for sure that it's not true because even the Catholic Church admitted in 1969 that there is no scriptural evidence for this. So we don't even have to go through academic proof because they admitted to it, right? But she was a prostitute, right? And she was somehow extremely important, which may be my next book, for the process of ascension, right? Because she was there and they couldn't get rid of her, right? And there was a strong erotic element around her. But it was just a kind of youthful impression, and I didn't follow up through this until much later. But when I look back, at my life and my spiritual experience, this was this realization of a mystery of this, the other, that's why it's the other goddess, the other feminine, not the one that was created by the patriarchy, the Holy Mother, basically, the mother of a man's children, right? The woman who takes somebody else's name, who, has a very specific role, and she has to stay pure because the offspring has to be of this particular male seed, right? So this is the patriarchal construct. And then there was this beautiful, enticing, erotic, wise, mysterious feminine that we were not allowed to look at. And in fact, that it was suppressed, because although she was there, because somehow they could not get rid of her, she was coined as a prostitute. So in my research, just moving in the research direction, I realized that there was the whole lineage of priestesses and goddesses in many traditions, spiritual traditions, and probably more than I explore, because I mostly explore Western traditions and Hindu traditions and tantric traditions. The lineage of these women and goddesses were also priestesses. They possessed the secret knowledge, that possessed the knowledge of ascension, and it was very strongly connected with what nowadays, in kind of New Age parlance, is called, sacred sexuality. But basically, the use of Eros for spiritual evolution. And I thought, wow. Right? And claiming, female sexuality as not only something that is, giving birth to life, which is already amazing, but actually what help us to ascend and also move between the worlds, between death and life. We are the portals. And there are shamanic, it actually started with shamanic traditions of early Hinduism, that a woman's body, especially a woman's sexual organs are the portal, not only to life, but also to passages between death and life, and that they were worshipped. And I thought that's an amazing knowledge that was hidden from us. So I kind of dived into it.
it's really fascinating when you wake up to it, and that these things that we're taught to be so afraid of are actually the doorway to power. For example, I know that in your book, you talk about the serpent, right? You talk about the meaning of the serpent in the tree of life and what all of this is, and how many goddesses are depicted with the serpent around them. But we're taught that that's terrible. Like serpents are scary and it means hell and all this kind of stuff in the, the United States, at least with Christianity, and I don't know where else. I just know my own family history. And it's really scary. It's like this terrifying thing. But then you find out actually that it's a guardian of wisdom, that it's a guardian of the goddess, and that it's there to protect, and it's there to actually open up access to these other realms of consciousness, right? And then it's connected with the Kundalini. It's connected with the Hindu understanding of the Kundalini energy that flows up the spine. And that this is actually, we know this now, that that's what happens. The energy, and when you have an experience of it, it's pretty trippy. When the energy is going up and down and up and down and up and down, it's like, whoa, what's going on with this? But, I was afraid of serpent for a long time because I didn't understand this.
Yes. So I think it was actually an attempt to make whatever is actually a power, which is associated with the feminine, to demonize it, basically. And this is demonizing of a serpent, which is also Kundalini energy. But if you don't mind, maybe I would just go through this very quickly, through this lineage. So when we go through Western tradition, I start with the goddess Ninmah, which is a Sumerian goddess, and we have carvings of her, which are like 5,000-6,000 years old, which shows the goddess Ninmah, who is sitting on a throne next to the tree of life. In front of her, there's a male figure, and he has horns. So it's quite interesting because horns actually represent the moon, and she is the sun. So, she was, because now we think that the moon is feminine because of the menstrual cycles, but actually she's the main power, and the moon is receiving the knowledge or the power from the goddess, and it's a male figure. And there is a tree of life in front of them, in between them, which is also the portal between dimensions. It's quite interesting. And behind her, there is an upright serpent, which represents, in my opinion, either Kundalini energy, or some people would argue like DNA helix, and she's extending her hand towards him, and she has a fruit in her hand, which is such a, it is also explored in the Bible in many ways. She's giving him this gift of wisdom, of life, of something, of higher consciousness. Right? It's goddess Ninmah with an upright serpent behind her. And then there is goddess Inanna, which is, a little bit later, who is also associated with the story of resurrection. She actually resurrected herself. So she didn't resurrect anyone. She didn't need anyone to resurrect her. She was her own power of resurrection, because she was, as if we know the story of Inanna, she was tricked to go into the underworld by her sister and so on. And then, but she managed to resurrect herself. And she's often portrayed with a serpent in her hand as well. And the serpent there, it's called the axis of the world. So again, it's a transition between the worlds, between dimensions, between life and death. It's a very mysterious symbol. So, and she's also called the first serpent who came up on earth. So, the power over this energy, this mysterious spiritual energy. And of course, when we have goddess Isis, who managed to resurrect her husband Osiris temporarily to conceive the child Horus. And I don't want to get into this because it's another book, but, actually Horus may represent a resurrected soul, like in esoteric Egyptian teachings, really, not as a child, physical child, but resurrected soul. And she's also portrayed with an ankh. People love the symbol of ankh, but ankh is a kind of combination of a tree of life, which is the wood, the serpent kind of curling around it, right? So the serpent is there, but Egyptian symbolism is very sophisticated. So we just kind of, make it a little bit more complex. So we have a tree of life, and we have a serpent kind of curling above the tree of life, and that's ankh. So the serpent is still there. And then, of course, we have story of Eve, which I didn't even explore in this book because, it's a completely different topic, which is also extending, the gift of life, fruit to Adam, right? And she's told this by a serpent, because the story is completely reversed now. Now she's bad. It was bad, that she did it, because now they are not slaves. You know what I mean? Because they disobey rather than claiming their own power. And in Gnostic teachings, Eve is the one that basically, says we are an autonomous beings, spiritual beings, right? And then, when I was in a church in Jerusalem, the Church of Saint Mary Magdalene, it was an Eastern Orthodox church on the Mount of Olives. I saw this beautiful painting, which is apparently quite prominent in Eastern Orthodox Christianity, of Mary Magdalene, not the penitent Mary Magdalene. Forgive me, I'm not worthy, but she's standing in her power with her hand extended, just like Goddess Ninma, with an egg. It's not a fruit now, it is an egg, like a cosmic egg, extending it towards humanity. And I know the medieval meaning of this, which I actually think it's just a medieval creation, which forgot the early meaning of this, which basically says that she went to the emperor and she said, if you don't believe in resurrection, this egg will turn red. But I think it's a very naive medieval story, because in fact, it proves that she's a part of this lineage of goddesses or priestesses, starting with Ninma, as far as we know, right? Maybe earlier, but this is what we know from archaeological discoveries, with this goddess female figure extending her hand towards humanity with in my opinion, the fruit, the egg, represents a higher wisdom. She is there. And when you think about it, our civilization nowadays is completely, going in the kind of technological way, right? So without the feminine, which is called the masculine brain. And we both have it, right? So it's not nothing against men. We both have masculine and feminine aspects to ourselves. So we are going towards now AI and, everything logical and mechanistic. And there she is, the goddess, who right from the beginning was offering us a different form of wisdom. So I think that this is what Mary Magdalene is a part of this lineage, even in the West, of those goddesses. And of course, the same goddesses existed in Hinduism, from the earliest times, such as Goddess Kali, for example, and Goddess Sundari, which, were high, powerful goddesses of transformation, and sexuality is a big part of beingness. Now, in fact, the Goddess Kali resurrects the order to the world by riding Shiva, who was dying on the battlefield, so there's through the sexual rapture, she brings back order to the universe. So in old tantric works. So, for me, they are representing the same archetype of the feminine that is highly erotic and also possesses the deepest knowledge, the wisdom of the mystery between life and death.
Yeah, and we are healing now this patriarchal demolition, I would call it, of feminine sexuality, right? Female sexuality has been demonized. And so now in so many people's lives, realizing that has been shamed and judged and guilted and all this really heavy stuff on top of it, right? And our bodies. And now in order to be free, these goddesses return, right? To support us in reclaiming our power. And when that happened to me, I called on Kali. I didn't even know who Kali was. I was ignorant. Right. I was asleep. I didn't know. Some part of me knew. And I was saying, I need some help, and there was also this help all of a sudden. And the acceptance of my sexuality and it was a storm that happened when it woke up, right? Because everything that was false in my life had to die.
That's right. And this is perfect. What you said is just perfect, because Goddess Kali is a goddess of sudden transformation. So if you call upon her, don't whinge later, because you want it, you get it. She is there for you, but she will take away things from you that obstruct everything. So because now there's no waiting there. She's the most powerful of our goddesses, and highly erotic as well, So the experiences of Kundalini movement, that are very highly erotic are usually associated with Goddess Kali, right? So she's just like, I like actually that you use the word storm, because it's like an electric storm moving through your body, basically, right? And there she is. But you can call upon her only if you are ready for a full transformation. So that's a beautiful experience that and this is exactly this, because when I was writing this book, I was extremely self-conscious because, a woman writing a book about women's sexuality and goddesses, and then, people think, and there's so much also, and I don't blame people, conspiracy theories about, all kinds of dark sexual stuff going on, which I'm sure it is, because some people will know how powerful female sexuality is, and they're trying to use it for their own ends. Not for our spiritual evolution, but for their own ends. When we as women, having this power, and becoming aware of that power, of our own eros, the power of female sexuality, we now can claim it and actually use it for the evolution of human consciousness, and not for some dark groups, doing some weird stuff, to get some material goods or something like that. So I think there was always a group of people they knew, ruling people, I'm maybe starting to be conspiratorial now, but when I studied different traditions, that they really try to suppress this aspect of, the feminine to start with, the feminine wisdom, like old women's tales, like, right? And this is what happened also to shamanism, right? And female sexuality, because they knew how powerful it is. However, on the edges of almost any tradition, including Western tradition, which are usually very mystical traditions, or in Hinduism, it is the tradition of Tantra, these traditions were preserved. So when you study like the origins of Tantra, they're actually shamanic traditions of Indus Valley, and they're women shamans, actually. And one of them was the daughter of one of the first original sage, apparently, Triambaka, and his daughter, half Triambaka, Arda Triambaka, started this tantric tradition of what's called Kula ritual, when using female sexuality for evolution of consciousness. And they started this tradition, and of course, all patriarchs will be like horrified now, because in this tradition of goddesses and priestesses, it is the woman that bestows enlightenment on men. So, because usually we have male gurus, we have priests, we have monks, and you have to apologize for being a woman. But in these traditions, mystical traditions and shamanic traditions of all religions, but on the edges, and you have to really dig into this, a woman is the one that conveys the enlightenment to a man. Like goddess Nimna in this, pictorial from Sumer, right? When she is with the upright serpent, right there, and she gives a gift, of something which are higher wisdom to humanity, which is represented by a male. So if you don't mind, maybe I would just move to experience now, right?
Yeah.
So I was studying Kashmir Shaivism, which is a form of esoteric Hinduism, and it's a tantric school, but I was not exploring, and I was reading with a translator of Kula ritual, who is actually a Catholic priest and a PhD in Sanskrit. And I was studying this for a year and a half with him, the translator of the Kula ritual, which is a tantric work, from esoteric Hinduism, with a Swami and a Buddhist monk. And occasionally I had a yoga teacher whom I, brought to the class. We had a study group. So I studied this because I was very interested in this, but I studied with complete devotion. I didn't think, I'm going to learn something about the goddess, or didn't arrive at this point yet. I just studied the tradition because it was interesting for me that the Eros and the feminine, were just so upfront there. And I realized that, yes, this is all about women conveying wisdom through erotic ritual to men. And then one day, I was coming back home, and I'm just being very open here, right, from a study group. And I was then in the only casual relationship that I had in my life at that time, because I was getting over a very serious relationship, and I just casually dating this man. And he was waiting for me, but he was also, spiritually aware man. But I was filled with teachings, I just came from the study group, and I was completely devotional towards these teachings. And I can be quite intense when I study something, like I studied body, mind, and soul, right? And when we got engaged, I didn't have any idea about, I didn't want to have some sacred sexuality. We just engaged in an erotic act. And suddenly, boom, I felt Kundalini movement, and when I later studied people who have the same experience, it's completely spontaneous. And I started to feel the Kundalini energy moving through me and towards my heart, and then exploded there. Like I went into total bliss, but not only this, I lit up like a bulb, like I was physically There was a light around me, like you have in paintings of, mystics, And then the man saw it, and he was like, wow, what's this? Right? Like he was, but fortunately he had enough spiritual awareness to knowing that something very special is going on, right? And then after a moment of this, the energy along my spine move, towards my third eye, and then here. And it's amazing. It's a conscious energy. So it is almost me, but much bigger than me. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's me in some eternal version, or maybe it's not even me. I don't know. And it paused. I could feel it, that it paused here. I was thinking, okay, maybe you just have orgasm, or I'm going to give her total experience of total consciousness, divine consciousness. And it exploded. And suddenly I was one with the universe. All I see is like particles of energy. And this kind of experience, you cannot just say. Some people ask me, how do you know it wasn't an orgasm? Well, it wasn't just an orgasm. Okay? As good as it may be, it's not that good. You are not suddenly in cosmic consciousness, and for days on end, you just I couldn't function. All I saw, it was just, I couldn't see like physical reality. I just saw energy moving around. So it also renders you dysfunctional. So, and this is the erotic experience that, the shamanic traditions of early Tantra actually was passed from woman to woman, right? Women who were obviously prepared for this, like in Western language, you would call it maybe priestesses. And then, it was suppressed, like in all cultures, it was suppressed. But in the 10th century India, there was a great philosopher, kind of Einstein of his own times, Abhinavagupta, who was very open-minded. And he invited also women sages into his court. Although he was a Brahmin, and it was a very patriarchal society by then. And then, he was interested in this, what is called Kula ritual. And in chapter 29 of his work, The Light on Tantras, he included the description of the ritual that Arda Triambaka actually started, so she kind of codified this experience. So it doesn't have to be spontaneous. But there are certain conditions that we can create to invite this experience. We cannot cause it, but we can invite this experience, and it is called Kula ritual. So, and it's been there forever. He was just the one that wrote it down, right? Because otherwise, this tradition was passed on from one woman to another orally, and they would have like their own disciples, but it wouldn't be disciples like many disciples. It would be like one aspirant, right? And who the woman thought, that the energy would invite him to participate in this experience of expansion of consciousness on the cosmic level.
I love it. You say it's an energy. It's an energy that you are welcoming in, and that energy is conscious, and that energy is deciding when and how, and all you can do
Absolutely.
is prepare yourself for it by practice and hope that it happens. But you can't really force it to happen. You have to, just kind of like an orgasm, you can't force that to happen. You can try and you can learn what you like and what you don't like. But this is beyond that. This is like, this thing happens whenever it wants, and I mean, it happened to me, and I didn't anticipate, I didn't know how to move my energy up and down my spine. That's not something I did. That just happened. It just did itself.
Yeah. So that's exactly because actually, I was participating in a Magical Egypt series when they interviewed people, who had the spontaneous Kundalini movement. And it was actually, all of them were spontaneous, I should say, Kundalini movement. And some people were really upset because some people practice like Kundalini yoga or, aesthetic practices. And they said, like, when will it happen? And it doesn't happen. So this energy is completely autonomous. And we can invite it, or whether it decides that, I don't think it's about worthiness. I think it's more about openness. And I do not even know what else. However, once it happens and it chooses you, let's say, it chooses you.
And it's true. Like after that process, things started really opening up for me in a different way. And I just kind of knew stuff that I didn't have any reason to know. And, it's like easier to tap in and just kind of get insights or get information, but it's not, I didn't like study any of those things most of the time. I just kind of felt it in my body and listened, and then there was just information available. But I think that it happens. I mean, it sort of chooses you that it's going to happen. And I could make up a lot of stories about that, but what's the point of making up stories? Because we don't really know if any of those stories are true. But it just happens like that. And that is frustrating. I just want to honor anybody who's like been doing one of those practices for a really long time and it still hasn't happened. I'm sorry. That's got to be really frustrating. But that's also probably part of the journey, right? Is part of the journey of your own self-acceptance in your practice. And with this goddess energy that just decides when she's going to show up, when she's going to make things happen.
And I think there's certain surrender there. And, and that surrender there, and also because we are talking about Eros, because it is also highly erotic energy, there's also a sense of joy and bliss. And I think when we are maybe too serious about certain practices, maybe we block it because we think it has to happen a certain way. And the goddess, she's just like, no, she'll make it happen the way she'll make it happen.
Even like the chanting too. I had a ceremony recently where I realized that the reason why a lot of enlightened beings, like say in India, start chanting or have chanted throughout the years is because by the time you get there, all you need to say is a chant. It's just like Radha, Radha, Radha. It's like that's all that's left to say. There isn't anything else to say. It's just like, thank you, mother. Thank you, mother. Thank you, mother.
And it just moves through your body, this joy moves through your body. So this kind of joy and pleasure, which is so regulated in our culture, or demean, right? Like look at like modern pop stars, and so on. These young women are very sexual in a very demeaning way. They're asked to act certain way, right? And even imitate some goddesses, but in a really ugly way, demeaning, what they actually represent. There is no kind of bliss and joy in this, there is no surrender, and this is, I think, a big part of this. And I think like the reason why they try to suppress it, because you cannot control it. And most religions are institutions, organizations. And how can you control something that is completely uncontrollable? And I think it scares them because it is not controllable. And it is completely anarchistic too, right? It doesn't care about power structures and hierarchies. And, imagine religions all religions are basically based on this. So I reached the conclusion that religions have nothing to do with spirituality, really. And it's just a desperate way of grasping for spirituality while actually blocking spirituality, because we are blocking the Shakti, blocking the goddess, blocking this energy. And I think goddess is really a form of energy, a form of energy that we were suppressing or were asked to suppress. And that this aspect of the feminine, which also exists in males, so it's nothing against men. Men have very powerful Kundalini experiences, but then very often they tend towards goddess, right? Because they knew it was this kind of joyful, erotic experience. But it's not controllable. So religions basically have no means of dealing with this, and that's why perhaps they suppressed it. Apart from the other reasons, like patriarchy always suppressing the feminine, right? But also the idea that this is so powerful, it is uncontrollable, it is too scary. We are not going there.
Yeah. And I'm actually thinking right now of Plato, and in Plato's teachings, there's like the little T truth, and then there's the big T truth. And religion is like the little T truth. Like you're in the cave and you have a piece of fire. And so you think you know the sun and your little T truth. But if you were outside and you would see the sun, yes. And the sun is the goddess. And I think that's such a reversal, Joanna, like one thing that you bring up in your book, that's a total reversal of the way we've been taught. We've been taught that the feminine is the moon, that the feminine is the reflection, but actually it's the shining light. And when, this like embracing that opposite of what you thought about yourself is really difficult. And I know we're talking about men and women both have these energies, but there is like a glow when a woman is in her power and her sexuality and self-acceptance and sensuality. She glows, she radiates like the sun. And that is what attracts men. That is that is the thing that's attractive. And when she's depleted and tired, then she can't do that. And then everything goes off kilter.
That's right. And what is unfortunate, it's beautifully put, Carrie, but what is really terrible, but and I noticed, myself as a young woman, now I don't allow it to happen anymore, but, when you glow, this glow, you're right, this is like a magnet, for the masculine, but very often men who have no understanding of that, they are attracted to it, but once they get in a relationship with it, they try to suppress it, because they fear that, or they want to control it, or they just want it for themselves. And that doesn't work this way. So this is something that is really autonomous and it's glorious and it's carried by women. And that's why there were always these traditions on the fringes of all religions when women were actually the light, that women were conveying, enlightenment to men. But I was giving this interview, on another podcast, and it created like chaos by, some men who really couldn't accept it. They said, no. In the Bible, it says this, in something else, it says that, because all of these religions were suppressing it, right? So when you come up with this, and it says that actually there is a path when a woman conveys, cosmic consciousness through erotic means to the masculine, there is a big uproar. People cannot accept it, but too bad, it is there and it is growing. And I think we need it more than ever because I think our civilization really goes in the wrong direction, completely masculine direction of artificial intelligence, prolonging our lives artificially, disregarding the soul, disregarding Eros, or actually demeaning Eros to its lowest level, right? Even using AI for sexual reasons, means, and so on. When there is we have this wisdom encoded in this, but it all starts with cherishing the feminine. But I think we have to start also as women, accept it in our own bodies. Don't see us as through the prism of patriarchal imagination of how my body should be, how I should act sexually, what should I do? But in fact, we have to claim it from within. And it is a journey. It is really a shamanic spiritual journey, Claim my relationship with my body, claim my relationship with my own sexuality, with my own Eros, with my wisdom, which is different than the one, like myself, educated academic, from what I've been taught. So for me, it was lots of deconstruction and it was often a painful process. And we have to take responsibility because yes, it is all patriarchy that did it. But I think at certain stage, we have to move away from the anger against the patriarchy and just, okay, so they did it. And now I claim my power. How am I going to claim my power? Because actually the survival of the species and our spiritual evolution depends on this power. So it's not enough just to be angry for other people suppressing it, but taking responsibility for feeling it, for using it and discovering within our own bodies and souls.
Yes. And getting really comfortable with our own, a sense of ourself as sexual beings, healing that sexual wound and reclaiming that power within. And I believe is very highly connected to the soul, as you mentioned, is that soul power, that soul light that flows through us, that imbues us with life. And it's like letting that part of us lead, that invisible part, right, of us take the lead. And these goddesses are here to help. Like I shared my experience with Kali. I didn't even know who Kali was. I called on Kali and Kali came and everything fell apart. The whole forest burned down, but I started off a new forest. That's the thing. When the forest burns down, the seedlings grow and they grow stronger. They grow a better forest. And that's what I'm experiencing now. And in your book, in the first part of the book, near the end of the first part, you actually you say there's 4 different pathways for Eros that a person could pursue. And there's goddesses. And Sundari also said, like, if we call Hrim, right, as Hrim, and then you call on this. And so tell us a little bit more about that. Like how, if somebody wants to wake this up in themselves and maybe they don't want Kali. Because she will come and she will destroy it all. So,
she will destroy it all. So be careful.
That's going to be it.
It's wonderful, but you have to be ready, right? Because she will burn down the house. Okay,
she will. She'll tear it all down.
you call me here. I am, and you get what you want, So be sure that you ask for her when you're ready. So I think that the goddesses are also energies. They are the archetypes, right? So there is a goddess Parashakti, which embodies all of this, but then there are goddesses that embody everything else. other aspects. So, for example, in ancient Egypt, you had goddess Hathor. So in my workshop, when I talk about Hathor, there are some women who identify with her because she's just the sexy mama, like the fertile, and she embraces her sexuality. And men love her because she's always in this glow, and she has enough power not to give it away, just because she gets. This is, for example, I in my workshop, I say this is the difference between Aphrodite and Hathor. Because Aphrodite loses her power in relationship. She gives up. She's beautiful and sexual and disempowered. Once she gets into relationship, okay? It's because suddenly, in the whole myth of Aphrodite talks the fall of the feminine once she gets into relationship. So she kind of gives in to what patriarchy tells her she should be, and she completely loses her power. In fact, she's being demeaned, by human men, although she's a goddess. So it's the story of Aphrodite. When Hathor manages, she is that. She doesn't give up her power. She is this kind of ultimate sensual feminine. And however, she kind of never challenges the patriarch because she's also the mother, so she's like the ideal, in a way, female from that point of view, right? But she claims her sexuality. And then there are other goddesses, for example, goddess Sundari. Goddess Sundari is the Hindu goddess, which unfortunately nowadays is also being demeaned, but because dubious massage parlors are called Sundaris, or beauty when in fact, she is the goddess who truly possesses her sexuality, but she's much more spiritual than Hathor or Aphrodite, because she's a goddess of three worlds also. So it's Lalita Tripura Sundari. And I always advise people, you can say only Hrim, which is when you sit down in meditation and you repeat Hrim, Hrim, because this is the seed mantra, in Hinduism for Sundari. But I prefer something much more sensual, and by calling her own name. You can even do it when you walk, when you dance, when you by yourself in your room. It's Lalita Tripura Sundari, Lalita Tripura Sundari, Lalita Tripura Sundari. Like you actually start, when you do it, even now when I'm sitting, you can actually feel energy moving through you, a very sensual energy, Lalita Tripura Sundari. You call upon this sensual, beautiful, but powerful energy, Lalita Tripura Sundari, because she's also the goddess of the three worlds, which means she transcends dimensions. She's like on the highest level, but descends upon this feminine, which is fully sexual and fully empowered, who lives in different dimensions as well and is happy to embody within you as well, So you call upon these energies to embody you. So you can either use the seed mantra, which is Hrim, or you can, I prefer to call her full name Lalita Tripura Sundari, because Lalita, it means divine plane, the divine plane of consciousness. Which is in her sensual aspect. And in Tantra, it is believed that everything is just a plane of consciousness. It is not good, it is not bad, it's just like a Shakespearean play, right? But with Lalita Tripura Sundari, it is a sensual play. It is your sensual relationship with everything. It doesn't have to be just with your partner or partners. It can be relationship with your work. It can be relationship with your life. It can be relationship with your spiritual path. So you bring up on this sensual aspect. So, for example, even when I walk in nature, which I think is one of the most spiritual meditations anyone can do, right? And I repeat the name Lalita Tripura Sundari, and suddenly, birds are singing, or I'm open to, hear birds singing, they come up to me, nature responds to this. Nature responds to sensuality, and it is an interdimensional goddess. And it is my opinion, the fourth part of my book, when I come back to Kali and Sundari. So I maybe tell the story of Kali, how she became Sundari, in my interpretation of the myth. Because in Devi Mahatma, which is an ancient tantric work, Goddess Kali was created through the third eye of Goddess Durga, when the world was overrun by demons. So Durga wanted to create basically like a nuclear bomb. This is Goddess Kali, right? Like now we have to destroy evil, because she was fed up with evil going on in the world. And sometimes I think we can relate to what's going on nowadays, right? Everything is going in a weird direction. But Kali, was so good at this divine fury, so to speak, to destroy evil, that she lost her discernment. and she started to destroy everything. Because and that's a spiritual lesson of Kali, once you start to destroy evil, you lose your discernment, because then you think everything is evil, right? And she started to destroy the good. She decided to destroy the gods and goddesses, until she saw God Shiva lying on the battlefield when she just wounded him. But because it is a tantric story, he's lying there on the battlefield, super handsome, because Shiva is always super handsome, in all the representations, and beautiful eyes, and with his penis erect, because it is tantra. And she falls in love with his beautiful eyes and starts to ride him. And as she rides him, she brings back balance into the universe, so to speak, of a divine feminine and divine masculine. And she starts to feel love. And as she's transformed then by this love into goddess Sundari. So the sensual aspect of her and her ability to give up fury for love turns her into goddess Sundari. So it's almost like the sensual representation of goddess Sundari after her own transformation. So this is when we give up the anger, even if it's righteous anger, like fury, patriarchy. And then you become Sundari, by calling her name, because now you embody that supreme power. And by embodying this supreme power, you do not buy into what you should or should not be, right? And then your goddess Sundari. So I highly recommend actually on just repeating her full name, Lalita Tripura Sundari.
Beautiful. I will add that to the show notes as well. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. What a gorgeous conversation. I think that many of us could resonate with being Kali at some point during this journey, being righteously angry about everything. But yeah, it's coming into this peace with that, and the balancing with the masculine, and coming into our personal power, really owning it and owning our journey, no matter what is done to us. We are now allowing this healing to move through us, for all of us. And it's going to benefit all of humanity, that we are doing this work, this inner work, to heal the feminine for everyone. And this is what I think is going to uplift humanity, is all of us taking this work to heart and coming inside. Thank you so much for all that you shared. Is there any, I know that I'm going to put a link to your book. Is there anything else that you'd like to invite people to know about you or to connect with you somehow?
Oh, thank you, Terry. So I have a Facebook page, public Facebook page, which is Dr. Joanna Kujawa, which is Kujawa. I think it's on the screen here as well. And I'm also on Instagram, which I started relatively recently. So, and I have a small YouTube channel where I have some videos there as well. So, and I love connecting with people. I love connecting with people. So, please do not be shy about it. And of course, as you said, we are the goddess, because I bed my soul there and my body, right, in this book. And also, I think it is a kind of lesson for all of us, what kind of narrative of yourself you claim. And I, in this book, kind of spontaneously, shamanically decided to claim this one particular narrative, and it turned out to be very empowering and very enjoyable. You know what I mean? Claiming this part of myself rather than hiding or being ashamed of. And it takes some courage, but I think it is completely worth it. Choose your own narrative.
Yes, choose your own narrative and get a copy of this book. It has so much really beautiful stories in it, and also really beautiful scholarly information too. So for those of you who want to learn more about the goddess in all these traditions, it's a very helpful book. So everybody, share it out. Please share it out, and share it out with somebody that you think might be interested in some of this wisdom. Give them a link to the episode, and give them a link to the book, and share this wisdom out. Let's all support the rise of the goddess. And we're going to give kisses now. Would you like to join me in giving everyone kisses? We're just going to give kisses now. Okay, everybody, here come your kisses. Love you guys. Thanks for staying all the way to the end. And I'll see you next week on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now, everyone. If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now. To dive in deeper to nourishing conversation, visit soulnectar.show.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken, awake, show. Take a sip from the drip of nectar, from the source of who you are. Yeah, yeah.